Eva, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here. You were one of the guests at my Winter Park stop on the Financially Lit book tour. I was so excited to meet you, find out more about your story. And I'm really excited about this episode because you're someone who reminds me of me in a lot of ways, in that, like, in my short time here on this planet, I've had a lot of lives, I've had a lot of identities. And I love finding women like you who unapologetically just pursue what they're curious about, because I think there is so much fear, especially amongst us women, Latinas. I talk to so many people who know they want to make changes in their lives, whether that's, financial changes or health changes or career changes. And it's like the fear can be so paralyzing. And so I'm really excited about this combo because I feel like you're going to drop some gems about how we can start embracing that internal courage to just give ourselves permission to show up as the most badass versions of ourselves that we want to be. So before we dive into all that, I would love for you to give us a little intro. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we're going to dive into your backstory.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Yes, I loved our face-to-face in real life in Winter Park to hear a little bit about your book and this amazing opportunity. So I'm very grateful. Well, from the Bronx, born in the Bronx, and then about the age of 12, we moved to Puerto Rico. But growing up in the Bronx, it's that hustle and grind mentality. There's a lot of scarcity. You see things. You see the Upper West Side, and it looks really nice and high end. And then, my parents did the best that they could. But as a young entrepreneur, I started my first business at the age of 8. And I sold Avon to all the church ladies because I realized that there was power in money. Like, I thought my 8-year-old little head is saying, if I can make money, no one can tell me what to do. And so that was not true because my parents still told me what to do. And so I had that entrepreneurial spirit, and we then moved to Puerto Rico. And so I started to question, well, here we are in the island. And I then again started another business. I started selling Mavi, which is a Caribbean drink. And I asked my grandmother at the age of 12 for a $50 investment. My grandmother in Puerto Rico, actually, she said, in New York, she said, if you ever need money, know that you have the Mavi recipe. You can make Mavi. So I had my grandmother in Puerto Rico gave me that initial investment, and I stood in the front of Econo supermarket in Puerto Rico with my little cups and my gallons, and I was committed to selling each cup for 50 cents. But I ended up selling out gallons at a time and called my grandmother to bring in more money. So I paid her back. I made some money, and I gave that money to my dad to buy groceries at the time. And so what happens is that hustle and grind mentality, that scarcity mindset that I grew up is really the thread here. Many different careers, but also past lives as well. And so the thread or the through line as an actor is that you can change characters. And so I started kind of transitioning. And although my parents, they always knew that I had that entrepreneurial spirit, but I was kind of doing my own thing, and I like to blow shit up. Like, that's how we transform, right? It's like I kind of push the edge a little bit, and I just kind of keep going until something great is going to happen. And so I lived through that, was in the financial industry for quite some time, got my investment license. I became a sales director for Mary Kay. I drove the pink Cadillac, and I sold a shit ton of lipstick, and that was amazing. And then I went to culinary school, started another business. So see the thread here. Corporate, is great. 9 to 5, great. I just can't do it.
It's not for everybody.
No, it's not. And so, it comes with its challenges, being an entrepreneur and the ups and downs and reinventing yourself. But I think that the bigger thread here is that when you grow up in an environment that's like, it's either sink or swim. New York, it's either you make it, it's fast paced. Come on, we got to do it, got to get that money, the city that never sleeps. And my little body was very hypervigilant. And I saw things at 8 years old that I'm never going to forget. And my parents thought, well, let's leave New York. Let's go to Puerto Rico for a better life. And we had that life, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't undo the things that I saw. And so my nervous system was on high alert all the time, that hypervigilance that I later realized, wait a minute, I don't have to keep living in this fight, flight, or freeze. And ain't nobody got time to freeze, right? We got to keep, we got to keep. So it's either fight, which I saw, or flight. And so you're always thinking of, okay, what's the next? What's the next? What's the next? And that kind of drove me through different careers and different opportunities, living in Japan, traveling to Southeast Asia, and having the opportunity to explore cultural differences, food, different kinds of belief systems, religious beliefs, and so forth, and how it impacts us as a whole, and not just from the money perspective, just seeing what's out there, because what I was taught was one way, but there's a whole world out there that you can live and you can say and be whoever you want. We live in the best country where we can just decide tomorrow, let's just switch it up, let's change it up. So that's kind of high level. And then I transitioned into the health and wellness industry because of the heavy cocktail of hypervigilance. I had to detox from it. So here I am doing the work.
I feel like you're speaking to me and so many people that listen to this show, because hustle is kind of ingrained in our DNA as Latinos, right? Like, it's just, when you think about all the things that we've had to survive and overcome as a lineage of people, it's a lot. There's a lot of trauma in there, and a lot of it manifests itself, especially I think with the first generation that quote unquote has access to all these opportunities. Like, you're the first to go to college, you're the first to work in corporate. There's like almost this unrealistic pressure to overachieve and to make the sacrifice worth it and to burn yourself out, because we didn't see anything else modeled, right? And it's like, if you've been given these opportunities to do whatever, you have to like do the most. You can't just go to college. You got to get a master's. You can't just get a master's. You got to get a PhD. You have to be the top of your class. You got to be getting a promotion every 2 years. You got to be doing all this shit. And I think for a lot of folks, they don't even realize when they're coming up against that burnout. They don't even realize they are in hypervigilance mode. They don't even realize like a lot of the shit that you're doing is a direct trauma response. So how did you come to that realization, right? Because you listed off some of your careers, and I have them listed here. I mean, you've been a financial advisor, sales director, professional chef, and now you're in the wellness space. So what about that journey kind of made you realize like, oh shit, I can't actually like overachieve my success. I can't mask the things that are really need to be addressed with all these like external accolades?
Well, a couple of 5-star visits to the hospital will do that. When I was in the Mary Kay industry, it's commission based. So if you don't sell, guess what? You don't eat. And so going through that, and at the same time going through building a business, because I quit my corporate job to do this full time. And I thought, okay, well, I got to do this. And I earned 3 cars in 1 year. I was that sales lady that drove that pink Cadillac, because of course, right? We're not just going to earn 1 car. We got to go for more. And then also experiencing a breakup and trying to figure out, oh my goodness, like I got to pay for this mortgage on my own. I broke off the engagement. I said I had my eyes set on success, and that relationship was not going to get in the way. And I remember laying in bed and I thought, oh my goodness, like the breaking down when you're going through a breakup, and it wasn't a good one. I don't think there's any good breakups, but it wasn't amicable. It was explosive because you have 2 Latinos, fight or flight, and it's survival. And so then I'm thinking, okay, I got to pay for this mortgage. I got to do all these things. And I remember laying in bed and my heart was pounding, and I wake up and I'm like, okay, today's the day I'm going to get a heart attack. I'm not going to make it. And I remember the thoughts in my mind of, well, what if I can't do this? There was no one really to support me from the business side, because they said, well, if you can't meet your sales quota, well, guess what? You just got to turn the car back in and call it a day. And I thought, no, I can't do that. I have to keep going. And so that morning I woke up and I called my girlfriend and I said, I'm not feeling too good. And I had OnStar on my pink Cadillac. And I remember driving all the way to her house and literally collapsed in her front door. She drove me to the hospital and I thought I was having a heart attack. It was massive panic that everything was going to come crashing down. But I was already working 18 hours. My body couldn't take the stress level of my personal life and also the entrepreneurial version of it. And then I had a couple more stays, a couple other hospital visits, weight gain, insomnia, and all of that. And I already was struggling with weight gain because, either you eat too much or you don't eat enough. And when you have a goal in mind, you forget to eat and then you overeat and, all of those kind of ups and downs. But when I realized, I was 35, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot continue going in this way because one thing you said in your book was you can't be successful if you're tired as fuck. And I'm paraphrasing here. You can't go after the promotion. You can't do all these grand ideas that you have. It ain't going to work if your body is tapped out. And so when I went to culinary school, I gained more weight because I learned how to make creme brulee from scratch. And I'm like, okay, this is no bueno. I can't do this. But it was at that moment after culinary school that I thought, after seeing these successful women that I was cooking for privately, they were unhappy. They had the nannies, they had the drivers, they had the personal stylists, they had corporate careers, politicians, government workers. I had the privilege to step into these multi-million-dollar homes and realize that although it looked like they had everything, we were the same. And realize that food is medicine and that we can transition, and that if I'm healthier, I could be even more successful if I wasn't hypervigilant. And I had to detox from that. And so I then started studying some more and learning. And I also had to detach a little bit from certain foods that were contributing to my mental health and well-being, because there were certain foods that weren't good for me, but they were part of my culture. And that's a whole nother conversation on that affected me throughout the journey. So it wasn't a one-shot thing. It was multiple things that I kind of had to go through, multiple scares, and realize it's not sustainable if I want to accomplish the things I want to accomplish.
I think about kind of even in my own journey of realizing things like that my mom had anxiety, basically like the entirety of her life, and not even knowing the word for that, right? And not knowing how then that impacts you as the child, and then how that manifests as an adult. I'm definitely hypervigilant because I just never really knew what the vibe was going to be in the house, what was going to set her off. And so it's like, you don't realize how much of how you show up in the world is influenced by your caretakers, your environment. When did that awareness start for you? Did you start getting to personal development? Did you start going to therapy? How did you become aware of maybe those things that influenced you as a kid?
Yeah. Well, I didn't start therapy till about a year ago, actually. That was a whole taboo conversation. My therapist said, as a child, I felt things. I'm very in tune with my environment, and I always felt like I can change it. So when I noticed that my dad was doing the best that he could, I didn't have bills to pay. But something inside of me was saying, well, you can do something. And I remember as a child being very nervous, like this hypervigilance of, oh, I can learn how to make cakes and I can sell cakes in the community. Like this desire to want to change my environment felt like it was possible. I don't know. I just felt it as a child, even though I didn't have bills. I wanted to somehow contribute, and I thought that I can make it better. It wasn't personal development I'm a life learner. So I'm always learning different things and different opportunities. And I would hear people speak. But when I stepped into personal development was when I signed up to become a Mary Kay consultant. And I went to that first conference and I saw these motivational speakers and I thought, well, first of all, no one looked like me, but I was pretty inspired. And I'm like, wow. Then I realized I was the first sales director in 4 counties that was Latina, and that these women, I was showing them, I was kind of like their motivational speaker in a sense, and that they listened to what I had to say because they're like, well, you can do it. I can do it too. And so it was this feeling that if we continue speaking these words, it'll start echoing through our community, and that it's possible and that we can do it, and that it only takes one person to do something great. And you look at them and you think, oh, she did it. I can do it too. But then, of course, right, that fear sinks in. And remember, I said I like to push the envelope a little bit. So I have looked into a lot of different motivational speakers, and I thought, okay, well, I can do that too. I mean, they're pretty special, but I'm pretty special too. And so I learned throughout time, and I took advantage of my corporate job that had trainings and opportunities, and I volunteered and I had mentors throughout my journey because I have this desire and this hunger to have this amazing life. And I believe that it's possible. And so I continue searching. So I guess I'm a student of life, I guess.
I really appreciate that perspective, because what I found is that it's more common to have a victim mindset in our community than it is to have that, like, I have the ability to change my environment. Where do you think that comes from? And like, how do you think people can harness that I am capable of actually creating my reality versus being sort of a victim to it?
That's a great question. Well, I want to attribute some of that first to my aunt that started working in Wall Street, Fifth Avenue. And I remember seeing her dress in a suit and going into work, taking the train. And she used to bring me to work with her. I would see all these people around me that did not look like us, but they had suits and they were doing something important. And I got to see that. And I started seeing her life. And I thought, okay, this is different than my parents. She had a beautiful brownstone home. And I would say that she was the first that actually owned a home in New York, which is like unheard of because we always rented. My parents owned a home when we moved to Puerto Rico. My dad built a house from the ground up. But in New York, the prices of real estate, that was a pretty big deal. And so that was what started to turn my wheels. And I looked up to her and I thought, well, you know what? If she worked in corporate, I work in corporate, I can do this. And, she was the one that helped me with my suits. And I looked up to her because her journey was very different than my dad worked for the Board of Education. But for whatever reason, her being a woman and wearing a suit and going onto Fifth Avenue and paying $15 for a salad kind of felt like she made it.
I love that.
Yeah. And so that she instilled that. I mean, she was doing it. And I was just, as a kid, we just kind of look. But the idea that we can change and manifest our life. First, I thought if I have money, well, no one can tell me what to do. So I thought if we have money, we can manifest whatever we want, right?
Yes.
And I always thought I like expensive shit. So this has to work. Like it just has to. So in my mind, when I learned about visualization, I didn't realize that visualization was real. Because I had done no research. I had never heard of anyone ever say this. But in growing up, they say, well, if you believe and you ask God that this is what you want, if it's meant for you, you get it, right? So that's kind of the traditional. But I thought, well, I really want this car. And I started envisioning looking out of my window and I would see the car. And it wasn't until I was really close to earning my first car, I sold my car. And I thought, well, that's going to be pretty motivating. This has to work because I have no mode of transportation and I work on commission. So we're going to make this work. And then that car was in my driveway. And I was like, I remember tears just coming down my face, and I thought, maybe there is something here. So, they say fake it till you make it. And I started creating this life that was possible. I moved from Puerto Rico to Florida, and I thought, this is my chance. I left Puerto Rico because I wanted something more. I was bored. I was successful, but I thought there has to be more out there for me. And when I came to Florida, I thought, well, this is it. I'm going to find myself a corporate job. I'm going to wear a suit. I'm going to make really good money. And I'm going to have the life that I want. And through that manifestation, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. As children, you tell your parents, well, why can't you just write a check? If you want something, you're like, just pull out a credit card, right? And your parents are like, money doesn't go on trees. It actually does grow on trees. But if we believe the universal forces and we believe that we just have to believe, that is instilled in us. Even as a child, they want us to believe in Santa Claus, and we believe, and miraculously we have these gifts. So why can't I do that at a larger scale? And it started with a car, and of course, putting the work behind it. But it's this belief that I know to everyone else in my family, they probably think, I don't know, but she says she's going to do something and it works. But I know throughout the process, they're thinking, she's crazy. Like, really? Really? Like, seriously? And I thought, I want to live in another country. I want to do all these things. And, people are kind of looking at you sideways. I told my boyfriend at the time, I'm going to earn a car with Mary Kay. The first night I signed up, and he's like, yeah, right. I said, you'll see, just watch. Well, he didn't make it to the grand finale because, that ended up not working out. But I had this belief, and I don't know, maybe it's from being in New York. It's either sink or swim. Like, failure is not an option when all odds are against you. If no one believes in you, which most of the time as an entrepreneur, no one really does, you have to believe in yourself above all. And I know that if it's available for everyone else, well, why can't I have it? We know that as children, but somehow we grow up and we forget that as a child, you ask for things and your parents did everything they could to give you that. But we can transition, and as we grow, we tend to stop believing. That song, Don't Stop Believing. It's like, no, we can believe that it's possible. Yes, then fear kicks in, and am I good enough? And the worthiness of things. I had a mentor that a business coach actually, and she said, you're going to stand in front of the mirror and you're going to call out these numbers. And I know they're going to sound really crazy, but you're going to say them like this: 5.2 million. 1.87 million. And I'm like, what? I don't know how to say those numbers. Like, I've never uttered those words. You get used to saying certain things and they become possible. And so it's something interesting that I still work through, because you never know what you're going to face as an entrepreneur. You have these great ideas, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And you have to be a little crazy to be an entrepreneur.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. I mean, I totally agree with that. I love your perspective on the power of representation with the story about your aunt, right? Because so much of what I've experienced with folks who found the platform and who've heard my story and read the book and all that is like just knowing that there's a possibility out there for me to achieve something similar to what you've done is like such a big deal, because you don't believe it's possible unless you see examples that you can actually relate to. So I think, for anybody who's listening, you might be that example for somebody. So do not shy away. Do not dim your light. Do not stay small. You don't know who you're inspiring just by being yourself. And yeah, I think it's definitely, you have to envision the life that you want and then actively take steps towards it, right? It's not enough to just have faith that things will work out. Faith works with work. Right. And so you got to remember, like, shit's just not going to fall out the sky for y'all. Okay. I promise you, you're going to have to do something, and it's probably going to be scary. I think a lot of what happens as we become adults, right? We are born as children, like with this imagination, this ability to just imagine things that are not possible. And then somehow along the way, fear starts getting in the way, and expectation and judgment and opinions, and all of these things sometimes end up masking who you actually want to be. So a lot of what I've had to do, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is kind of just dismantling what everybody else's perception of who you should be is, and being okay with everybody not necessarily being down with the cause, because it ain't about them.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It's not about that. It's your life. At the end of the day, I think we need to remind ourselves, like, you cannot be living your life out here for other people.
No, and you're going to have to be okay with making some people mad. I will have to say that even growing up as a child, I'm here to transform. That is my sole purpose, is to transform and blow things up. And it's really uncomfortable, but I'm learning that that is my purpose. When we blow the top off, when we have that awakening, that moment that we say, you know what, at all cost, if you had an aha moment, if it shifted your perspective, if it transformed your life, my work here is done. You may never see me again, but your life is transformed. That's what I came here to do. And I had a hard time growing up because I would say the things that would get you slapped. Okay. Often. Okay. Believe it or not, I grew up in that time where it's like a chancleta, backhand,
La
that
correa, all of it.
all of it. It's like, I don't know what it would be. I mean, my mom's amazing. If I had me as a kid and I'm the mom, woo. But I tell my mom now, I got in trouble for saying things that maybe I shouldn't say. I think I was like an old soul in this little body. And I thought I was all grown up. People were like, you don't belong here. You're a child. I'm like, no, but I know things and I see things and I want you to know. And now I tell my mom, I said, well, hey, now I can say what I want and I can get paid for it. So it wasn't too bad.
Listen, it was always the kids that were getting in trouble for talking too damn much that are now the ones that are getting paid to talk. Okay?
Excessive talking. It's like, she's great, but I put her around the classroom and she's always talking. Maybe it's that the other kids were also talking. Well, you're the only one that I can hear because I have something to say.
I love it. Okay, I want to go back to something that you mentioned as you were working as a professional chef, working with these $1 million families, and you realize, like, the key to success that maybe we've been told, the career, the money, the big house, all of those checklist items are not necessarily enough to live a quote unquote happy life. So first I want to know, how do you actually define happiness? Or what have you seen in our community specifically that is maybe contributing to us not living to our full potential, especially when it comes to health and wellness?
Well, I believe that happiness is not something we chase after. Happiness is within us. We are happy. We are love. It's inside of us. Once we start chasing it and wanting for it to materialize into something physical, well, if I have the house, if I drive the car, if I have a 6-figure salary, then I'll be happy. Well, you'll get there and you realize, oh, the carrot has been moved and now I have to go for more because that salary is not enough anymore. That car is not enough anymore. Is really understanding that we have it inside of us. How do we tap into that? Growing up, we got bills to pay and that scarcity mentality, and there's never enough or just enough, right? Like everything is paid for, it's just enough, but we can't go on a vacation because we don't got vacation money. We have enough money for you to look good, go to a good school, and take care of yourself. But then you also don't take care of yourself because you don't have time. My dad worked 2 jobs. He worked for the Board of Education and he was a professor at Fordham University. So we barely saw my dad. Like, he worked all the time. And my mom stayed home with us. and we were very much cared for, but there was that enough. But my dad, I know, was tired. I mean, he was burning the candle on both ends. And so when I walk up to these $1 million homes and these women that we think, okay, they've made it, they got the everything that we want, but they're still unsatisfied and they're not healthy because they have insomnia. No one knows this. Unless you're in somebody's home, you see somebody in a meeting, you think she has it all. She has a car, she has a house, she has a husband, the kids, the nanny, the vacation to the Maldives. Great. It's not until you go into a home that you realize, wait a minute, there's actually more to this. You can have all those things and be satisfied at the expense of your own health and well-being. You're chasing these things, but you had mentioned in one of your conversations about like, when is enough is enough? At what level? So we have to decide, how do I define success and happiness? I want to have control or be accountable for my own time. I want to do things that are fully satisfying to me. I want to live in my purpose. Yes, I can go and work for somebody else, or for these women working a corporate job. And some of them had their own businesses, but they became slaves to their own businesses. And they've told me, I sacrificed having a family, a husband. You see this really nice house, but I'm here all alone. And that's not fun. Now thinking I need to sell my business and then I'm going to live my life and find this happiness. I thought having the business and the company and all of that was success. Now I realize I need to sell the company so that I could be happy. But now I'm alone and I risk so much. So it's both sides of the spectrum. I think we're all kind of given this, if you have the corporate job and you get the degrees and you have the house and the husband and the kids and all of that, then you're going to be happy. No, now you have more responsibilities and you realize you're at a job that maybe you're not in alignment with and you want to start your own business, but you're like, how do I do that? Because I have bills to pay and I have a mortgage. And so it's both sides of the spectrum. Throughout that journey of chasing after that carrot, that golden carrot that keeps getting moved throughout time, I started to notice that they were getting sicker and sicker in so many different ways. Insomnia, weight gain, brain fog, fatigue. Like they were just unhappy. They were literally just making the donuts. Like, I'm doing this. And that's when I transitioned not only myself, my business, and the services that I was offering, because I realized there's more to food when it comes to health and wellness. How do we bridge that gap? And it really first stems from, how do you define that? What makes you happy? How do you tap into that happiness and satisfaction to say, I've done really good for myself, pat yourself on the back. And how about now I take some of that money and I start investing it in my own health and well-being so I can hire a therapist, hire a coach, maybe start putting some boundaries, not saying no to certain commitments, because you don't have to network every single day. Like, you can come back to yourself, and money doesn't take away that hypervigilance, but you can use money to transform your health and hiring the professionals that can support you and realize, as Jim Carrey says, I wish everyone would have everything they've always wanted, so they realize it's not all it's cracked up to be.
That's real. Okay. That is real, because I think we're very much used to the idea that we use money to acquire things, right? It's very normal to want to get a new car, go buy the bigger house, get the nicer outfits. But I think in our community, especially, it's still a novelty to like spend money on your wellness, on your health, on better food, on physical fitness, on mental health therapy. Just like, what do you think it is about us that makes it seem like that's frivolous or that's just not a priority?
A big thing is when we talk about that fight, flight, freeze, is that you're on two spectrums. You're either fighting or you're running, but there's no time to freeze, right? Because bills need to be paid. So we're like, you can always be doing more. That means that if you start taking care of your own health and well-being, you need to slow down. You need to start looking around, and slowing down is not really part of our culture. It's like, well, if you, like you say, you have one degree, get the next one. And when are you going to get your PhD? You get married. When you're having kids, you get engaged. When you're getting married, when you're buying a house, it's always the next, the next, the next. And so it seems frivolous. You know, I had an experience at Costco where I was buying really good quality tuna and it was on sale and I bought a ton of it. And the girl literally tells me, "Where are you from?" I said, "Oh," my husband looked and said, "Ooh, maybe you should have not asked that question." And I said, "What do you mean where I'm from?" And she looked at me and said, "You sound like a white girl." "Excuse me? Why? Because I'm buying tuna?" I said, "Let me tell you something. I'm a professional chef. I'm a national board certified health coach. You look at me now, but I weighed over 200 pounds. I don't play around with my health. So me buying tuna means that I want to take care of my health and well-being, but it also isolates you because it says, oh, well, you think you're better than me? Oh, ay, mira, esta ahora tiene un terapista. Tú tienes dinero para un terapista. Oh, a therapist you have money for a therapist? Oh, you have money for organic food? Well, you grew up eating that food. I did, but now I have a choice. I can change things. My parents did the best that they could. Then you start to feel isolated because you feel like when you start bettering yourself, it's like crabs in a bucket sometimes. It's like, oh, you think you're better than because you can do this. It really doesn't say much about me. It says it's their limiting belief that you are now blasting out their own insecurities, that I can't do it. Oh, you think you're better than because you can do it. That now isolates you. You said when Jenny from the block doesn't live in the block anymore. Ooh, that hit me. Ooh, because you think that no one prepares you for doing the things to take care of yourself in your health and your wealth, your overall well-being. You think, it's all cool. Like, hey, like life hack, like I'm doing all these things, and no one prepares you for how isolated you're going to feel when you shop at certain supermarkets, when you start eliminating things off your pantry. And when my dad told me, he's like, well, you just don't like Puerto Rican food. I said, no, sir, that is not true. 2 of my most popular Puerto Rican dishes were featured in the Huffington Post. Okay. One of them being mofongo. So it's this idea that because I have made health and well-being the center of my life, it's only because I realize 8 years old, make money. Now I have control. I can do whatever I want. But the missing piece was that if I have no health, I can't get the things that I want. So that's been my main focus. And that sometimes feels for our community like, must be nice. Oh, you can do that. Oh, well, good for you because I can't. It's the fear. What stops our community from changing their lives is that they don't want to feel left behind. They don't want to feel like, if I change, will you still love me? Will you still accept me because I think differently, because I've seen other things and I want more for myself? Can you still love me and accept me as I am? And that cultural connection, that familismo that says we're part of a tribe. When you set yourself outside of the tribe to go after something else, it feels lonely sometimes. And no one really prepares you for that. And then you're a sellout. It's like, oh, well, you're doing all those things, good for you. But you are the topic of conversation in those family gatherings.
I think at the end of the day, we just have to be okay with being the topic of conversation because you don't talk about people that ain't doing shit, right? So like, let's reframe and wonder, is it such a bad thing? I don't think so. You might be sparking conversations that needed to be had by other people just by you offering a different perspective. And, at the end of the day, there's that quote that says something about like quiet women never make history or something like that. And I know I'm like butchering it, but something like that. That's it.
Absolutely. It's like, yo hago lo que me da la gana.
There you go.
Yeah, like, I think I've been living that since I was little. I got in trouble, but now it's like, okay, fine. It's okay. You have to be okay with ruffling a couple feathers, because staying in that place when I think some of us come with this like desire and we just want to thrive. Some of us will learn it. Some of us are little late bloomers, but we have to be okay that what people think about you is not your business. It's fine. Think about it like media. Bad media, good media is media. First, they'll criticize you, then they'll imitate you, and then they'll ask you, ¿Me puedes dar un consejo? Because you look so good. Like, ¿qué tú estás haciendo? Like, tell me, like, give me the tea. Like, what are you doing? I've been doing the same thing I've been talking about for the past 10 years. But now, because there's results, now people want to know. So you have to kind of ride that wave and just be okay with not being accepted. In some places, you'll be accepted. You'll find your tribe. You'll find the people that think you're a pretty big deal. Love those and keep them really close to you, because they'll support you when things get a little hard and people don't believe in what you have to say. But you have to believe it for yourself and have a couple people on your side that do believe in your mission and that you're doing amazing things.
I love that perspective. Okay, so, one of the things that I find interesting is that you talk about the fact that a lot of us have this perception that healthy means one thing. And I think a lot of that has to do with what we're fed from the media perspective, diet culture, all that shit, right? The tia that's always making comments about you at the fucking Christmas dinner. It's always about just like the aesthetics. But you offer a perspective that there's actually an entirety of wellness that has to factor in physically, mentally, emotionally. You have these 10 core areas that we need to be addressing. Can we talk about some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So health is very flat. Like, it's like, okay, well, this is your BMI, this is your blood work, and from that health perspective, are you overweight? Are you underweight? That kind of thing. When we think about wellness, we're thinking about that holistic, that entire, it encompasses all parts of you. So when we look at our body, we have a heart, we have kidneys, we have a brain, and they all work in this like beautiful orchestra. It's like a symphony. And the heart doesn't tell, the kidney, oh, you're doing too much or you're doing too little. Like, they all work. We don't have to tell our heart to pump. It keeps pumping, it keeps doing what it does. So looking at wellness from that perspective, we're looking at emotional wellness, we're looking at environmental wellness. We talked about being triggered by our environment, the things that we see. There's a great book called The Body Keeps Score, and it's in our body. We're feeling these things. What we see in our environment can affect our emotional, our mental, and our physical. We have our financial wellness, which is important. If we are unable to take care of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're not able to take care of the bare necessities, well, it's going to affect our well-being. We have our intellectual wellness. We have our physical, so our physical body, overweight, underweight, can we move, mobility, and those kind of things. Our social wellness. Are we socializing during COVID? Now loneliness has surpassed obesity because of COVID, right? We have media, we have FaceTime, we have AI, but we still have to put ourselves out there and have that interaction with people. It actually increases your well-being. You sleep better when you surround yourself, when you physically see people and you laugh. There's something about our culture when we would get together, those family gatherings where you have the entire family get together, have food. That is part of our wellness. We have our spiritual wellness. We are spiritual beings. How are we connected in this universe where this little speck, this little energy being just floating here in space, in this continuum of this bigger universe, is that we are connected to something greater, whatever that looks like. I grew up with religious belief systems, and then I started seeing more for myself and realized that we are all connected spiritually, that we meet people and we are connected to them. So where do you fit in this bigger belief system? What happens when your time expires? Where do you go? Being really firm in whatever it is that you believe, there's no such thing as right or wrong, but that spiritual wellness, if we don't nurture that spiritual wellness inside of us, then we feel disconnected. We're moving around and we have this body, but there's that spiritual wellness that is very much part of those 10 core areas. We have our cultural wellness. How do we fit in? Are we really close to our culture? Have we redefined what our culture looks like? And that is part of where we also fit in. Now, there's that through line there. It's all about wellness is how are we connecting? It's like a puzzle. We're connecting all of these pieces. We can't just focus on one because they all impact our body. If we isolate ourselves, you start experiencing depression, and then you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to shower. You start gaining weight simply because you're not socializing. Maybe you have social anxiety that happens, but it does affect our health. You're not able to sleep. Well, maybe you just had an argument and you're not as connected to your family. When you have those rifts between families, it affects your immune system, believe it or not. So again, connected to our overall well-being, our occupational wellness. So what are we doing? Are we in alignment? Are we satisfied? You know, when I work with women, we talk about there's been women that have transitioned careers because they realize, oh, I am not satisfied. And that the reason why they're overweight or they're depressed, and I'm laughing because I'm envisioning one of your Instagram posts that said you weren't depressed. You just needed to change.
You need a divorce. You need a divorce, honey. That's environmental wellness.
Yeah. Right. And the last one is digital wellness. And that's as of late, because how we perceive ourselves in the digital world, but also are we doing it responsibly? And it's also kind of like an extension of us. So it's like, here we are having this conversation, but my social media is doing its own thing. Somewhere around there in social media, I'm either karaokeing or dancing or doing something else while I'm sitting here with you. Our responsibility. And so this can take an entire lifetime to really look at all of these core areas. There's not one that you can focus on wholeheartedly and say, if I just eat the right foods and I don't go out and I don't have alcohol, that I'm going to be healthy. Well, it's going to affect another part of your well-being, which is your social wellness. How satisfied are you with your life? You might hit your goal weight, but you've removed yourself from an entire community or social environment. And so kind of tweaking and looking at those different areas can take a lifetime, but we have to start somewhere. So it really is where the person is in their life. I started with food. That was kind of my go-to. And then my spiritual wellness kind of took over. And then I had more of an awakening of my connection to the universe and that I believe I can have everything I want. And so I started developing all of these areas, and I'll do this till my time expires because I want to be the greatest version of me possible until there's no more time left.
I love that. It's a really great perspective to have because you realize that there is no limit to what you can achieve, you know, what you can refine, what you can change. I love that mindset. Now, I have a final question for you before we close this out. What's your best piece of advice? Knowing what you know now, having gone on this wellness journey, having had these awakenings, what would you tell your 18-year-old self to focus on that maybe you didn't back then?
That's a interesting question because I've been really revisiting my childhood a lot because we've always been those people. We just grew up. We have bigger bodies, but we knew something as children. First, I would tell my 18-year-old, relax. It's going to work out. because everything that you always set your mind to at 8 years old, at 12, at 18, at 21, at 32, there's a common theme here that says that if you put in the work, you believe that it's possible, it's going to work out. So relax. You have everything that you need. It's all inside of you. If everything went away, if everything blew up and I had to start from scratch, I would start all over again with the baseline, and you start going back to basics, and you can build it again, because what's inside of you, no one can ever take from you. If we realize that we are these people, that we've always been these people as children, we get to just accept that we all have a purpose, that we are how we are. I don't want to die a copy of somebody else. I want to be different. I want to stand out. There's so many colors in the Crayola box. Why choose the same color as everyone else? Like Harold and the purple crayon. Like, I can just create this world, but I felt like I had to do certain things or be a certain way, or maybe do what my aunt did, or maybe do what my dad did, or, maybe they figured it out. Maybe they know best, and realize that my journey has always been different, because my calling, this wasn't a conference room board meeting. My purpose was given to me. It wasn't given to my family. I came with this purpose, and to think that I'm going to fulfill that purpose looking at everyone else around me gave me anxiety, because it didn't work. And so I would tell her, just relax. You'll see the credits. Your name will be on there. It all works out, because you always go after what you want, and just go after it, and it'll all manifest itself. If it doesn't work out, it wasn't meant for you. Let's just say that.
That's a mic drop moment, y'all. This might end up being the quote from the episode that you keep repeating over and over again. Eva, this conversation has been incredible. I know so many people listening to the show are going to want to find out more about you, how they can work with you. So tell us where we can find you and how you work with the clients to improve their overall wellness.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been a fun conversation. You can find me on Instagram, she_wellthy, and that's well, WELLTHY, or www.shewellthy.com. We're actually launching a group coaching for high achieving women, and talking about core areas. The core areas is on honoring hunger and fullness, overcoming self-sabotage, and managing cravings, because they're not going to go away. And this is an 8-week group coaching session. So you can find me there. I'm doing very little one-on-one coachings. It's now on a group setting, focusing more on speaking and on a corporate wellness perspective. So you can find me there. And on Facebook, SheWellthy.com. I do have something special for our Yo Quiero Dinero listeners. If you're all interested, I do have a promo code if you decide that you do want to hop in on this bandwagon of group coaching for a $50 coupon code. It's YQD Fall 2024. And that's only for the listeners. Once you listen to this podcast, you'll get the promo code.
Ooh, I love it. And we're going to put all those details in the episode show notes. When is that kicking off?
We start September 18th. So it's back to school for all the high achievers here. But the promo code expires September 15th.
All right. So go ahead and hop on in, y'all. If you said that 2024 was going to be the year that you focus on your wellness, and you're listening to this in September, and you're like, oh shit, that fell off the freaking list. That fell off the vision board. This is your invitation to recommit. And I have a feeling that it's going to be one of the best investments you make, because when you come from a place of being okay with like investing in yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, there's always a payoff. That is the only way that you can guarantee success, is investing in yourself. So Eva, thank you so much for giving us permission to like think beyond the hustle, think beyond the fight or flight, really get intentional about the lives that we're creating in a holistic way. And I'm really excited for folks to be inspired by this conversation. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.